Now turn to section 1.
You will hear a conversation between Harry and Andrea, two students who have just finished their final exams. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now, let's begin. Answer the questions as you listen. You will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi Andrea, how are you feeling now that exams are over?
It's fantastic to have finished, isn't it? And to sleep in every morning. What about you?
Well, I've been catching up on sleep too, but I've got a lot to do before I leave for England. Perhaps you could give me some advice. I've got a lot of things I can't possibly take back with me, but I don't know what to do with them.
Well, it depends on what sort of things they are, and whether you're thinking of giving them away or selling them.
Well, almost everything. Furniture, the fridge and other kitchen stuff that I bought from the previous tenant. But the new people have already got what they need, so they're not interested in buying stuff from me. I can't afford to give it away, but I'm not sure how to sell it all. Oh, and there are some clothes and books as well.
Why can't you take them?
The books are really heavy. It's so expensive if you exceed the airline baggage allowance. And the clothes just won't all fit in my suitcase. It's amazing how much stuff I've accumulated since I've been here. Anyway, I don't think I'll need as many summer clothes in England as I have here in Australia.
I see. Well, there are several alternatives. First of all, you could put up notices around the university about the books. You know, on the notice boards in the Student Union building and in the economics department. Anywhere second and third year students will see them. People are always keen to buy cheap textbooks.
Okay, what should I say on the notices?
Just put the titles, authors, and price you want, your name of course, and maybe put your phone number on those little tear-off tags.
That's a good idea. And what about the furniture?
You could try doing the same thing, but usually students are away all summer, so they don't want to buy furniture now. Another place to try might be a second-hand shop. Someone from the shop will usually come around and give you a free quote, and then you can decide. But you don't usually get much money for that sort of stuff.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Another alternative is to put an advertisement in the Trading Post. Do you know that paper? It comes out every week advertising things people want to sell. You have to pay to put the advert in and then hope people phone. Give them as much information as possible, and if they're interested, invite them to come and have a look. The hard part is agreeing on a price.
No, I haven't seen the Trading Post, but I should have a look at it. And I could advertise the fridge, the microwave and the furniture. But the kitchen stuff isn't really that good. You know, old cutlery, a few pots and pans and some plates and things. What shall I do with them?
Well, another option is to donate the kitchen things to a charity shop. You know, like the Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul. Why don't you get a second-hand shop to give you a quote first?
Yes, I could do that. Find out how much they'll give me and then decide whether to sell them or give them away. But I've still got the clothes.
A charity shop will take them too, as long as they're in good condition. And even though you don't get any money, at least you know that someone who really deserves some help has benefited.
That's a good point. I'll advertise the expensive stuff, the furniture, and donate the clothes and kitchen stuff. Let's go and buy a trading post and you can help me write the advert.
Well, actually, I'm interested in buying the fridge and the microwave, depending on the price, of course.
Okay, let's see how good you are at bargaining.
That is the end of section 1. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You'll hear a guide talking to a group of tourists about Buckingham Palace. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Now, of course, Buckingham Palace is instantly recognisable to millions of people around the world. As we pass the palace, I'd like to tell you a few things about the history of this famous building. We think the first house was built here around 1624. In 1674, that house burned down and a new one was built, called Arlington House after its owner, the first Earl of Arlington. Then, in 1703, the first Duke of Buckingham changed the design of the house and the name. It was then known as Buckingham House. The building we see in front of us now has undergone many changes since it was first built. The east front, which is the part we see from the road, was added as part of the work done by Queen Victoria and was completed in 1850. But the palace has remained pretty much unchanged for nearly 100 years. The last major changes to the structure were made by King George V, who, in 1913, had the east front redesigned as a backdrop to the large memorial to Queen Victoria, which had just been placed outside the palace gates. Since then, only minor changes have been made. I should point out, though, that the palace was bombed 7 times during the Second World War, most seriously in 1940, when the palace's chapel was destroyed. Today, of course, it is the home of the royal family, but that wasn't always the case, although they did own most of the land it was built on. It was George IV who turned it into a palace, doubling its size when he became king in 1820. He had inherited it from his father, King George III, who, in 1761, had become the first royal owner of the building, though it was still not used as the home of the royal family, just as a private home for Queen Charlotte. It was known as the Queen's House at that time. King William IV finished the work after his brother, George IV, died. But King William never moved into the palace. In fact, in 1834, he offered it as a new home for Parliament after the Houses of Parliament were destroyed by fire. The offer was not accepted, though, and in 1837, when Victoria became Queen, the house became the main royal residence in London. However, Victoria and her husband Prince Albert found the house too small, so they carried out building work to further enlarge it. This included building the east front, which I've already mentioned as the part we are looking at now. Victoria was also responsible for moving the Marble Arch, built as a part of the palace itself in the 1820s, to where it stands today, separate from the palace on the corner of Hyde Park. For 20 years or so, the palace was often the setting for huge banquets, dances, and musical performances. This period lasted until Prince Albert died in 1861, after which Victoria spent very little time there, and the palace was hardly ever used.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
When Victoria died in 1901, Edward VII became king. He was responsible for most of the decoration inside that exists today, and the dark days of the later part of Victoria's reign were fairly quickly forgotten as the palace came back to life. The palace has been in continual use by the British royal family ever since. A lot of people ask me if they can visit the palace. One way is if you're lucky enough to be invited to one of the 3 garden parties usually held every year. As many as 8,000 people attend these, although most of them do not get to meet any members of the royal family, and they don't see much of the inside of the palace. The garden is, however, quite spectacular, and it is the largest private garden in London, with an artificial lake, 30 different species of bird, and over 350 different wild flowers, some of which are extremely rare. Inside the palace, there are 240 bedrooms, 92 offices, and 78 bathrooms. There are also 19 staterooms, which are used for official engagements and ceremonies. Members of the public are only allowed to visit the staterooms, and then only in August or September when the monarch is not there. It's worth it though, because there's a lot to see in the staterooms, including examples of some of the world's best art with works by Rembrandt, Rubens, and Canaletto. The tour, which lasts up to 2.5 hours, ends in the garden, where you can see more of the outside of the palace not visible from the road.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You will hear a female and a male student talking about the mock exams that they have just taken. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25. So, what did you think of the practice exams last week?
You mean the mock exams?
Yeah. I thought some of them were tough.
They were certainly hard and generally they were very long.
Yeah, they were spread over a whole week, which made it impossible to relax.
Exactly. But what did you think of each test?
Of the 7 exams we did, the least enjoyable for me were the 2 3-hour essay papers.
Why didn't you like the essay papers?
I'm not particularly good at writing things down like that in a short space of time. And I don't think it's a good way of testing our theoretical knowledge of medicine.
I'm the opposite, I'm afraid. I'm much better in the written essay exams than the other types of tests. But what about the 2 multiple choice exam papers in basic science and anatomy?
They weren't too bad. If you didn't know the answer, all you had to do was guess.
That's okay, but I never feel comfortable with guessing. And you know that there is research that shows that women are disadvantaged when doing multiple choice questions compared to men.
You've mentioned this before, but I'm not sure I believe it.
It's true. Multiple choice questions benefit men more than women. They are a male construct.
If you say so.
It's not if I say so. Anyway, you have to be careful with multiple choice questions because of the negative marking. That can really bring the score down if you keep guessing and get all of the guesses wrong. It's double negative.
Yeah, that is a danger.
What about the role play? Did you like that?
Yeah, with the actors and actresses as simulated patients. Yeah, I thought that was by far the best part of the exam.
Why was that?
What I liked about it was during the 24 test stations, we had a chance to show what we know about communicating with patients and show our practical medical knowledge, etc.
Yes, I think I agree with you there. I enjoyed all of the stations, but I can tell you I was tired at the end. I have done a practice exam with 12 test stations, but not 24. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating.
I agree completely. It lasted nearly 4 hours in total with the break. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 26 to 30. What did you think of the other 2 exams?
The 2 problem-solving tests? I didn't think I was going to handle them very well. But in the end, I think they went better than I thought they would. What I liked most was the test where we had to work in groups of 4, and to solve a problem we had to prioritise actions.
That was very interesting. I'm not sure I did very well in that, though. Did you feel comfortable being in a group of 4 and having 4 examiners watching you as you discussed the problem?
We did practice it several times before. You learn to forget that someone is watching you.
But some people are better at speaking in group situations like that, and they get the best marks.
The test doesn't just assess whether people can talk a lot. It's about showing you can listen, organise your thoughts, and then show you can be part of a team, allowing other people to speak.
Well, we'll have to see how it goes. When do the results of the mocks come out?
They said next week, and then it's the finals 2 weeks later.
Yeah, we've got that to look forward to. What is the policy on resits?
Why? Are you planning to fail?
No, but, well, you know what I mean.
The resits are held in September, and if there is any problem after that, it goes to appeal.
We'll just have to make sure we don't fail any part of the whole examination. I certainly wouldn't want to do any of it again.
Me neither. It's hard when you are not allowed to fail any of the exams.
I bet they don't have that policy in any other subject.
Probably not.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a talk given by a lecturer to a group of civil engineering students on the reed bed system for sewage treatment. Before you hear the talk, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 34. Now listen carefully to the first part of the talk and answer questions 31 to 34.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about what is now called the reed bed sewage treatment system. This system uses naturally occurring reeds to treat domestic and industrial waste. It's an environmentally friendly alternative to normal systems. You all know what reeds are like, don't you? Those tall plants with hollow stems that grow in wet places, like marshes, for example. Here's how the system works. First of all, an artificial marsh is created. To do this, holes are dug about 1 metre deep and usually rectangular in shape. They are then lined with clay or plastic, and the liner is covered with gravel. After that, a system of tubing is laid, with holes in it, and more gravel is added to cover that. Finally, reeds are planted in the bed. The sewage is brought to settling tanks. From there, it is distributed to the roots of the reeds through the tubing. Note that the waste material enters the beds underground and remains underground. The reeds conduct oxygen very efficiently through their stems to the roots system. Here, bacteria work to reduce the waste material to basic elements. What comes out of the artificial marsh is water that has been cleaned through a natural process. The purified water leaves the reed bed through a simple outflow pipe. The water that comes out has to be tested. Sometimes it's held in a pond until it evaporates or soaks into the ground. Sometimes, after testing, the water is discharged directly into streams and rivers.
Before the talk continues, with questions from the students, you have some time to look at questions 35 to 40. Now, as the talk continues, answer questions 35 to 40.
The reed bed system originated in Germany in the 1970s, and installations have been built in a number of countries throughout the world. To give you an idea of the size and appearance of a reed bed installation, an area of 3 by 5 metres approximately would be adequate for a single house. It would look like a pond overgrown with reeds. There are cities with 150,000 people in Germany whose entire sewage treatment requirements are served by reed bed installations which extend for 10 to 20 hectares. There are two wonderful environmental advantages. First of all, reed bed systems are natural composters. As time passes, high-grade soil builds up in the beds. The soil can be removed and used for agricultural purposes. Soil produced from waste containing heavy metals would of course have to be tested and the toxic material removed by chemical processes. An additional advantage is that the reed bed can function exactly as a marsh, providing a healthy natural home or habitat for waterfowl and other birds, insects, reptiles and mammals. But there are practical advantages to a reed bed system over existing sewage treatment plants as well. At all levels, the cost is lower than for normal systems. Labour costs are a fraction of the costs of a conventional system. Typically, a large-scale reed bed installation will cost 10% less than a mechanical system. They require little maintenance, and unlike mechanical systems, the efficiency of reed beds increases over time. But before we go any further, you must have some questions. Maybe this sounds too good to be true.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask. If these systems have so many benefits, why aren't they more popular? Why don't we see them everywhere?
As I said, the technology is now almost 40 years old. Demonstration projects of all types have been built and monitored and are slowly convincing regulators of the advantages of the system. But you have to understand that regulating authorities are by nature conservative and resist change. Typically, there's a lot of opposition to these systems by manufacturers and by everyone involved in maintaining the conventional systems. Reed bed systems require fewer staff to operate, so there would be a decline in the workforce. Therefore, unions would resist the change as well.
What happens to reed beds in winter? Does the efficiency decrease?
The above-ground part of the plants die back in cold weather, but the roots remain alive and active, and the system continues to work just as effectively in winter. As soon as the weather warms up, new reeds appear and grow quickly.
Is there a problem with mosquitoes in these ponds?
Well, they're not exactly ponds with standing water. The beds look more like a field covered with long grass. The soil is moist, but not like a swamp, so there would be no more mosquitoes than in any other field. Remember, the effluent enters the beds underground and remains underground. OK, let's get into some of the technical details now, and I'll answer questions as they come up.
That is the end of section 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.